Good morning, everybody, and welcome here to Kulturhuset and to Interaction Unfinished. This is an event that is hosted by Live-dagene, Fantasiforbundet, Knutepunkt, and Alibier, with support from our generous sponsors in the Norwegian Art Council and the Norwegian Foundation for Free Speech. And we are here today to talk about interaction. It's a lot of people who talk about interaction these days. It's a buzzword. It's something that a lot of people are fetching more and more interest for. But interaction, it is quite hard because you have to let go. You have to let go of the control and you have to let other people put their filthy hands on your masterpiece. And this is not easy. And I think many of us in this room, we are doing it, and we are doing it to different degrees, and I think we are pretty much doing it to a very high degree. Some of you know that I sometimes like to talk about design in terms of faders. So a fader is when you have a mixing desk to control light or sound. You can pull different levers up and down in order to make sure the sound is louder or less loud. And sometimes when we talk about design, we can use this metaphor to put two different design ideals at each end and discuss the different possibilities that are in between. And I think if we were to discuss interaction with such a fader, we could in the bottom end say that this is completely passive, and in the top end, maybe what we should say is that it is unfinished. We also have a lot of possibilities in the middle, where the audience or the participants, they have some control, they can do something about your piece, but they don't really have the full ability. Maybe they can push some buttons or they can give some input, but in the end, it will be the same. And those of you who are familiar with role-play design, you might be familiar with the term of railroading. And railroading, that's when a railroad, it's on a track, so it goes in just one direction and you can't really change where it goes. So it means that the participants are taken from A to B without having any influence over where this story goes. However, sometimes we can make interaction by making railroads that look a little bit like this, where the railroad is split. So the people that are participants, they can choose, do you want to go this way or the other way? But they still don't really get their filthy hands on your masterpiece because you have a plan anyway. And if you do this many times, it will be those two varieties every time. So you still are in control, even though you leave some kind of interaction to the participants. But I think today we will talk mostly about kinds of interaction where we are working towards the design ideal of the unfinished. So why do we want to do this? Why do we want to give up the control, and why do we want to make other people interfere with what we make? I have some thoughts about this. One of them is that we are in a digital era, and of course, you can have interaction in the digital world as well. That is not something that only belongs to the physical world. But I still think that in a digital world, there are some things that we cannot achieve, some kind of magic that happens when humans meet. And I think that is one of the reasons. For example, now in institutions of education, we see that the lecture is slowly becoming more and more obsolete because people can find better lectures on the internet than they can find in their local university, perhaps with some exceptions of some very high-profile universities. You might say it's a paradox, we have the lectures here today, but the reason we do that is because it's not just about the lectures, it's also about the meeting between people and the interaction that happens in between the talks. Or in houses of art, I think they discover that they are increasingly challenged by the digital world, that you can see pieces of art on the internet, and in the near future, I think with virtual reality, you might not even, for three-dimensional artworks, it can still be possible to explore them almost in the same way as if you were in the museum. However, the dimension of meeting other people the dimension of interacting, it's much harder to recreate. Another thing I think draws us towards this unfinished ideal and the desire to make interaction is the dimension of the unexpected, that we want to explore something. And if you are an explorer today, it's hard to find some island where no human has set their foot before to discover a new species of animals or something like that, because so much is discovered already. And even to invent something new, it's quite hard because everywhere in the world people are inventing stuff and it's going global. So even when you think that you have created something unique, maybe you realize, oh, there's somebody in another corner of the world who has already done that. But if we work with interaction, then something new happens every time. If you have a truly interactive work, then it will not be the same each time. If you run it over and over again, each run will be unique. And I think that's what draws many of us towards this design ideal. In this room today, we have a lot of the expertise that exists in this field. We might not be world famous or making a lot of money on our expertise, but I think in this room we have some people who know about a field that's growing and that's attracting more and more attention. And I'm quite certain that the expertise that we share together here is expertise that will not be made obsolete in the near future, at least. I know that they are talking about artificial intelligence that can be creative and these things, so maybe in a distant future. But for now, I think the competence on interaction is something that we can be quite certain will be useful even as the robots are taking over a larger and larger part of the society. So for today, we also have a request for you to leave a little bit more of the digital world than you are used to aside. And you have probably noticed that you have been given these program books. We encourage you to use them to take notes and to keep the phones and laptops away, or at least in flight mode, and pay attention to the speakers. They will tell you stories about something they have created, something that means something to them and that they want to convey to you for you to get inspired, to learn, and to maybe create something yourself in a while.